Sidon or Saïda is the third largest city in Lebanon. It is located in the South Governorate of Lebanon, on the Mediterranean coast, about 40 kilometers north of Tyre and 40 kilometers south of the capital, Beirut. In Genesis, Sidon is a son of Canaan, a grandson of Noah. Its name coincides with the modern Arabic word for fishery. Two castles that were cleaned and restored by the French in the early 20th century. History. Sidon has been inhabited since very early in prehistory. The archaeological site of Sidon-2 shows a lithic assemblage dating to the Acheulean, whilst finds at Sidon-3 include a heavy Neolithic assemblage suggested to date just prior to the invention of pottery. It was one of the most important Phoenician cities, and it may have been the oldest, for there and other ports a great Mediterranean commercial empire was founded. Homer praised the skill of its craftsmen in producing glass purple dyes, and its women's skill at the art of embroidery. It was also from here that a colonizing party went to found the city of Tyre. Tyre also grew into a great city, and in subsequent years there was competition between the two, each claiming to be the metropolis of Phoenicia. Glass manufacturing, Sidon's most important enterprise in the Phoenician era, was conducted on a vast scale, and the production of purple dye was almost as important. The small shell of the Murex trunculus was broken in order to extract the pigment that was so rare it became the mark of royalty. In AD 1855, the sarcophagus of King Eshmanazar II was discovered. From a Phoenician inscription on its lid, it appears that he was a king of the Sidonians, probably in the 5th century BC, and that his mother was a priestess of Ashtart, the goddess of the Sidonians. Quote, "In this inscription the gods Eshmun and Baal Sidon, lord of Sidon, are mentioned as chief gods of the Sidonians. Ashtart is entitled Ashtart Shem Baal Ashtart, the name of the Lord, a title also found in an Ugaritic text. In the years before Christianity, Sidon had many conquerors: Assyrians, Babylonians, Egyptians, Persians, Greeks, and finally Romans. Herod the Great visited Sidon. Both Jesus and St. Paul are said to have visited it too. The city was eventually conquered by the Arabs and then by the Ottoman Turks. Like other Phoenician city-states, Sidon suffered from a succession of conquerors. At the end of the Persian era in 351 BC, it was invaded by the Emperor Artaxerxes III and then by Alexander the Great in 333 BC. When the Hellenistic era of Sidon began, under the successes of Alexander, it enjoyed relative autonomy and organized games and competitions in which the greatest athletes of the region participated. In the necropolis of Sidon, important finds such as the Alexander sarcophagus, the Lycian tomb and the sarcophagus of the crying women were discovered, which are now on display at the Archaeological Museum of Istanbul. When Sidon fell under Roman domination, it continued to mint its own silver coins. The Romans also built a theatre and other major monuments in the city. In the reign of Elagabalus, a Roman colony was established there, and was given the name of Colonia Aurelia Pia Sidon. During the Byzantine period, when the great earthquake of AD 551 destroyed most of the cities of Phoenix, Beirut's School of Law took refuge in Sidon. The town continued quietly for the next century, until it was conquered by the Arabs in AD 636. On the 4th of December 1110, Sidon was captured, a decade after the First Crusade, by King Baldwin I of Jerusalem and King Sigurd I of Norway. It then became the center of the Lordship of Sidon, an important lordship in the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Saladin captured it from the Crusaders in 1187, but German Crusaders restored it to Christian control in the Crusade of 1197. It would remain an important Crusader stronghold until it was finally destroyed by the Saracens in 1249. In 1260 it was again destroyed by the Mongols. The remains of the original walls are still visible. After Sidon came under Ottoman Turkish rule in the early 16th century, it became the capital of the Sidon Eyalé and regained a great deal of its earlier commercial importance. Modern era. After World War I it became part of the French Mandate of Lebanon. During World War II the city, together with the rest of Lebanon, was captured by British forces fighting against the Vichy French, and following the war it became a major city of independent Lebanon. Following the Palestinian exodus in 1948, a considerable number of Palestinian refugees arrived in Sidon, as in other Lebanese cities, and were settled at the large refugee camps of Ain el-Hilwa and Miamia. At first these consisted of enormous rows of tents, but gradually houses were constructed. The refugee camps constituted de facto neighborhoods of Sidon, but had a separate legal and political status which made them into a kind of enclaves. At the same time, the remaining Jews of the city fled, and the Jewish cemetery fell into disrepair, threatened by coastal erosion. Sidon was a small fishing town of 10,000 inhabitants in 1900, but studies in 2000 showed a population of 65,000 in the city, and around 200,000 in the metropolitan area. The little level land around the city is used for cultivation of some wheat, vegetables, and fruits, especially citrus and bananas. The fishing in the city remains active, with a newly opened fishery that sells fresh fish by bidding every morning. The ancient basin is transformed into a fishing port, while a small quay was constructed to receive small commercial vessels. Saïda International Stadium was inaugurated in 2000 for the Asian Football Confederation's Cup 2000. Impact on Sidon of regional underdevelopment. According to a recent United Nations Development Programme report, data also point to an increase in urban poverty, especially in Lebanon's largest cities. Suburbs such as Beirut, Tripoli and Saïda, as illustrated by poverty-driven symptoms. In another UNDP report, the author discusses the development predominance of Beirut over the rest of the regions of Lebanon is a well-known imbalance that can be dated to the early 19th century. With the expansion of Beirut in the 1870s, urban growth in the future capital city outgrew Tripoli and Saïda. Transportation routes, missionary schools, universities and hospitals, as well as the Beirut port development and the commerce of silk participated to the fortification of Beirut as a major trade center for Mediterranean exchange. However, the establishment of Great Lebanon in 1920, under the French Mandate, added the poorer areas of the north, Beqa, and the south to the relatively affluent cities of Mount Lebanon. This addition made of Lebanon a country composed of unequally developed regions. This legacy remains a heavy load to bear socially, culturally, economically, and politically, even though the public policies elaborated by the young Lebanese state were attempting to have regional perspectives. The early urban planning schemes reveal a development approach exclusively acts on Beirut and its suburbs. The post-war development policy of the state, promoted by Hariri government, was centered around balanced development and is widely inspired by the 1943 Pact and the 1989 TAF agreement. However, the application of this policy aims mainly at the rehabilitation and construction of roads and infrastructures. Another of its components is the rehabilitation of government buildings. Transportation projects constitute 25% of the budget of 10-year economic plan developed by the CDR. However, all these projects are predominantly concentrated around Beirut, ignoring the regions. The former Makaband, the treatment plant, Near the southern entrance to the city used to be a rubbish mountain, called at the time by the locals the Macabre, namely, a 600,000 cubic meter heap that reached the height of a 4-story building. It was originally created to dispose of the remains of buildings destroyed in Israeli airstrikes during the 1982 invasion, but it then became the main dump for the city. Growing out of the sea, it became an environmental hazard, with medical waste and plastic bags polluting nearby fishing grounds. Sidon politicians, including the Hariri family, failed for decades to resolve the Macabre crisis, which has endangered residents' health. In 2004, engineer Hamzi Mofrabi of Sidon.It conceived the idea to establish a treatment plant for the city's decades-old chronic waste problem. He established IBC Enviro, privately funded, and the treatment plant became operational in 2013, and LT, http, www.ibcenviro.com, and GT. The Ministry of Environment came up with a $50,000 plus plan to clean the whole area and transform the dump into a green space, along with other heaps in the country. Kamla Beach in Sidon, a coast in close proximity to the sea castle, witnessed a large municipal clean-up in May 2011, as it was an easy target of rubbish being washed up by the Macabre. These plans aim to revive the former glory of the city's coasts and attract tourists who avoided swimming in Sidon Sea before. The project of cleaning the region where the waste dump has already started, and currently a waves barrier is being built, and the vast bulk of the waste dump being cleared. Local government. The city of Sidon is administrated by the municipality of Sidon. The municipality is constituted of a council of 21 members including the city mayor and his deputy. It has administrative and financial independence but remains under the control and supervision of the central government, specifically the Ministry of Interior. The municipality's jurisdiction is limited to a region of 786 hectares in area and 5 meters in elevation, while each of the city's suburbs is administrated by its own independent municipal council. Sidon is the center of the Governorate of South Lebanon and hosts the seat of the Governor of Southern Lebanon. The city is also the center of the Sidon district and the union of Sidon and Zaarani municipalities. Sidon hosts the southern regional headquarters of a series of governmental facilities like the Central Bank of Lebanon, Electricité du Liban, Central Telecommunications Station and others. It is also the home of the Justice Palace of South Lebanon in its new headquarters on East Boulevard. In the 2000 and 2005 parliamentary elections, the Sidon district along with the Tyre and Bint Jbeil districts formed the first electoral district of South Lebanon. However, in the 2009 elections, and due to the reactivation of the 1960 electoral law, the city of Sidon was separated from its district to form a separate electoral district. Demographics. Sidon is the seat of the Greek Melkite Catholic Archbishop of Sidon and Deir el-Qamar, and has housed a significant Catholic population throughout its history. Sidon also hosts the seats of the Sunni Mufti and the Shiite Ayatollah of South Lebanon. In the 1930s, when Lebanon was still under the French mandate, Sidon had the largest Jewish population in Lebanon, estimated at 3,588, with 3,060 in Beirut. Main sites. Sidon Sea Castle, a fortress built by the Crusaders in the early 13th century. It is located near the port of Sidon. Sidon Soap Museum. It traces the history of the soap making in the region and its different manufacturing steps. Khan el-Franj, built by Emir Fakhreddin in the 17th century to accommodate French merchants and goods in order to develop trade with Europe. This is a typical khan with a large rectangular courtyard and a central fountain surrounded by covered galleries. Debane Palace, a historical residence built in 1721, an example of Arab Ottoman architecture. It is currently in the process of being transformed into the History Museum of Sidon. This villa was earlier occupied by the Hamad family in the 18th century and also by members of the famous Ottoman aristocrats of the Abaza clan in the late 19th century and early 20th century. The vaults at the ground level being originally stables for the villa residents and then turned into shops as part of the old souks, unknown until recent time by association to the Abazes. Old Souk, a historical vaulted market stretching between the sea castle and the castle of St. Louis, the castle of St. Louis. It was built by the Crusaders in the 13th century on top of the remains of a fortress built by the Fatimid Caliph al-Mu'izz. It is located to the south of the old souks near Murex Hill. Eshmun Temple, dedicated to the Phoenician god of healing, built in the 7th century BC. It is located in the north of Sidon near the Wale River. The Ziri, a tiny rocky island located 1.5 kilometers off the coastline of Sidon. In ancient times, it was used as a breakwater for the protection of ships and fleets. The island is a preferred destination for the locals who come here for picnics and swimming. The island is accessed by several ferry boats from the port of Sidon. The Corniche is a seaside promenade that extends for about 7 kilometers along the city's coast. The Corniche is a popular destination for walkers, joggers, skaters and bikers. Pushcart vendors offer an array of local snacks and drinks. The Sidon Rest House, a traditional architectural structure that houses an elegant and well-known Lebanese restaurant, overlooking the sea castle and the old port, is with a view of the Ziri from its long terrace and garden. It also features a courtyard interior with a fountain and ornamented walls with masonry archways. The largest Lebanese flag. On Lebanon's 66th Independence Day, Sidon witnessed the erection of the largest Lebanese flag. The flag is 12 meters long and 6 meters wide, and was erected on a 21-meter-high pole. The flag was raised on the intersection of Rafiq Hariri Boulevard and Riyadh Solh Street, and is easily accessible from the Corniche. The flag was painted by 66 students from the city. The Bahar el-Din Mosque, financed by Rafiq Hariri and named after his father. The mosque is a 21st-century take on Istanbul's Ottoman mosques. Located on a roundabout on the city's northern entrance, the mosque is an architectural gem that dots the city's skyline. The mosque, with its authentic arabesque designs, interior Islamic inscriptions, inner courtyards, Mecca-styled minarets and awe-inspiring 36-meter-high dome, is a non-miss landmark in the city. The British War Cemetery in Sidon, opened in 1943 by units of His Majesty's British forces occupying the Lebanon after the 1941 campaign against the Vichy French troops. It was originally used for the burial of men who died while serving with the occupation force, but subsequently the graves of a number of the casualties of the 1941 campaign were moved into the cemetery from other burial grounds or from isolated positions in the vicinity. The cemetery now contains 176 Commonwealth burials of the Second World War and 9 war graves of other nationalities. It was designed by G. Levet. It is perhaps the only garden in modern Sidon that is elegantly kept and cared for. It is not a public garden but can be visited when the wardens have its gateways opened. Architecture and landscape. In general, the architectural spaces of the old part of the city, with its antique, medieval and Ottoman quarters, are impressive, and are ranked as World Heritage. It is adorned with various examples of great architectural legacies since antiquity. This is the case despite the fact that its buildings and alleyways are neglected, and require monumental renovations and organized efforts to prevent them from falling into further ruin. Some international funds were allocated to sponsor the facelifting of certain public spaces and old squares with the provision of minimal infrastructure. There are also individual initiatives to restore specific neighborhoods as pioneered by the Audi Foundation and its elegantly rehabilitated old soap factory, now turned into a museum. The same applies to the renewal of the Debane Ottoman mansion of Villa, which was originally linked to the Hamad family trust and was even occupied by a branch of the aristocratic Abaza family towards the end of the 19th century. The old city has great architectural potentials that remain underdeveloped. It has qualities that can put it on par with the old quarters of Antibes if its architecture becomes safeguarded and protected as well as promoted. For quality lifestyles, Sidon can learn from more modest yet successful examples in Lebanon itself, such as the restoration and adaptive reuse of the old quarters of Byblos and its small seaport entourage, or to be inspired in a humbler scale by the development of downtown Beirut, the modern city of Sidon that extends outside the walls of the medieval quarters is generally chaotic, deprived of any notable aesthetics, built with inexpensive material, and lacking in any form of urban planning. There are some minor exceptions to this at the level of individual buildings, especially those erected in the 1950s to the 1960s. In addition to a small number of mosques, commercial malls and villas are buildings designed by proper architects or upmarket developers. The sprawl in the built environment has disfigured the cityscape and the landscape around it. Ugly buildings and terrible parking lots replaced the great citrus orchards that once surrounded Sidon and used to perfume it in the springtime. The only highly maintained green space that has refined qualities is the war cemetery of the British legions in the Levant during World War I and World War II that fell in Sidon, beautifully landscaped and managed by the British. This cemetery is surrounded outside its fences by dilapidated buildings and scarred, neglected landscapes. Near it remains a large citrus orchard that one hopes will resist the assaults of chaotic and irreverent builders. Moreover, the old city of Sidon that was always connected to the sea in its waves has been separated from its seashores by a very wide highway of asphalt that the locals refer to as the corniche. These rather defacing aspects are also set against a total lack of green public spaces and gardens. This aggressive degradation in the urban and architectural qualities has furthermore reached a dangerous turn in ecological terms with the disposal of sewage in the seafront and the dumping of refuse material that culminated in a mountain of rubbish known as the Macabre, which threatens not only Sidon Sea and the life within it, but also a vast stretch of the eastern Mediterranean coastline. In fairness, one still has to note that Sidon is not worse in its urban and environmental conditions than other Lebanese cities like Tyre or Tripoli. The greatest maritime city of Sidon, which was once set in a long-standing marriage with the sea, and that used to be adorned in all sides by gardens and orchards, is now turned against itself, becoming a living threat to the sea that also consumes the remainder of the green landscape and litters it. Maybe the future generations of this once grand city will someday experience the saving awakenings before it is too late. Perhaps the expat immigrant Sidonians who have been exposed to the qualities of life in North America, Europe, and the rich Arab states of the Gulf may bring novel initiatives of more refined development. Old City. The historical core of Sidon is a Mamluk-era old city that extends between the Sea Castle and the St. Louis Castle. Located on a promontory jutting into the sea, this walled medieval city is very well preserved and is still inhabited today. The old city resembles a vaulted maze with narrow alleyways and winding streets. Arched pathways connect the different neighborhoods of the city. On street level, numerous souvenir shops and mini-markets can be found with old-fashioned bakeries making crunchy whole wheat bread, called kark. A lot of the alleys take the name of the residents' occupations, like the Carpenter's Alley and the Tailor's Alley. Several mosques dating back to the Umayyad era are still preserved and are open to the public. A number of TV series and music videos have been filmed inside the old city of Sidon. Being of great historical and architectural significance, the old city went through a lot of renovations and there is still some measure of restoring to be done rather than focusing on facelifting. Perhaps the potentials of this city in architectural terms exceed those of other Levantine coastal cities. The morphology of Old Sidon has resonances in terms of potentials with the French Mediterranean resort city of Antibes. However, the local Sidonians and the Lebanese in general have not yet recognized the potentials of the city, which is vaster than Byblos, the currently most touristic and preserved old city in Lebanon. Shopping and entertainment. Besides its old medieval quarters that contain some small traditional bazaars, the modern sector of Sidon contains several shopping venues boasting local and international brands, as well as a handful of food and beverage outlets like the Spinneys and BSAT supermarkets. Traditional coffee shops serving Turkish coffee and the fruit-flavored Hubble Bubble occupy the seafront of the old city, while modern restaurants, especially those that serve Lebanese and Italian cuisine, have centered in the new city. From McDonald's and KFC to Starbucks, Burger King and Pizza Hut, several Western chains have opened at least one branch in the city, with more opening in the near future. Traditional Oriental sweets are Sidon's speciality, with regionally renowned sweet shops found all over the city. Shopping is concentrated within two areas, East Boulevard and the city center, from high-end designer stores to stores directed to low and middle-income consumers. Clothing stores in Sidon cater to all tastes and needs. Several international clothing brands can be found in the city. These include Aldo, Jack Knapp, Jones, Vero Moda, Springfield, Timberland, Zara, Mangard, Pull&Bear, Mothercare, Bossini, H&M, Benetton, and GS. Some of these stores could be found in the two malls in the city, Saïda Mall and Le Mall. Aside from kids' entertainment facilities, cafes and restaurants, Sidon also has a large amusement park near its southern entrance, but it is utilized seasonally. Education. Sidon is home to numerous educational facilities ranging from public elementary schools to private universities. According to a 2006 study, the city is home to 29 schools that serve a total of 18,731 students. 37% are in public schools, 63% are in private schools. Sidon also contains 10 universities, 5 of which are private universities. The Beirut Arab University declared recently that its future Sidon campus will host its Faculty of Medicine.